Conservancy that had the restoration done. What we are obligated to do in perpetuity again, forever and ever, is stewardship. Which means every year, the village, just like we know we have to plow snow every year, we have to pick up garbage every week, we're going to have to do what's called stewardship to the Conservancy, which we will hire a professional every year. Right now it's Dave Coulter. 10 years from now, okay, it'll be somebody.
So the village has faltered all these years doing that. They haven't done anything.
Well, we have been doing, but we've never included.
They never touched that property.
You're exactly right. We never included the Conservancy easement, and that is what you can, in some ways, I mean, I'm very proud and I respect these homeowners that have read, acknowledged, and understood their deed covenant, and they have lived by it 100%. And they came to me and they said, Linda, and they're right. They're absolutely right. And you know what? I know it's a hard pill to swallow. I mean, my kids are older now, but I understand the value of having this picture of having a yard and room to run around in. But I think when it's all said and done in a couple years, this is going to be beautiful. It's going to be a process. Change is not easy. There'll be an ugly period when you're transitioning. But I think when it's done, it's pretty. You can put your lawn chairs out there. You can put your hammock out there. Kids can play there and throw a frisbee. It's still your land. You can use it. You're not going to be putting turf grass. You're not going to be mowing it. You can't put a permanent gazebo there. But you can still use the land. In fact, to me, it's what a great place to have a barbecue. Look at what I got on my property. Look what I back up to.
I hope people feel that way when they go to resell it.
You know, I think it will help you when it's done.
Well, there's an educational process we're all going through, and there's a lot of people that I deal with all the time, and my company is perpetually dealing with people that don't understand the difference between native and non-native. And you can manage native properties so that they are very attractive and they're very people-friendly. And that's what we're going to do with this property back here. We're going to use low-growing plants, we're going to use flowers, we're going to install shrubs and trees at the direction of the property owners up to a certain amount, and we're going to make this a people-friendly 25 to 30-foot zone back there. It isn't going to be what it's like now. If you look on the western edges of the properties, Wally's property and a couple others down there, they're all overgrown. They're overgrown with buckthorn right now because we didn't understand when we went through and did the restoration of Cranberry Lake. We stopped too soon. But now we're going to go into that property, get rid of the buckthorn. It will not come back. It does fractionally for a few years. It takes about 3 years to break the cycle. Once you break the cycle, it's very easy to keep it under control. It's much easier than mowing your lawn. Once we get that out of there, then you have an option of either having it be very rustic and very dense with native plants, or you can have it wide open with like low-growing sedges that are only about as tall as this microphone. You put that in there. Only thing you can't do is you can't put in turf grass, you can't put down pavers, you can't do the half a dozen things that the Army Corps requires you not to do. Other than that, you can do anything you want back there. It's your property.
Now, one question I don't have a legal answer for, it was raised, and I commend you for getting your real estate broker license. Good for you. And maybe you can spearhead this. I would encourage everyone. You're going to have to, that's your property. It's going to stay your property. We will do the stewardship, as we mentioned. And that gets funded through the SSA. The SSA has always been there. Now, we have not levied the tax on the SSA for the last couple of years. We will actually, in the month of December every year, we have to levy the SSA, and we determine what amount. We will be levying the SSA this year, and that will be about $38 per household for that 553 members that I mentioned. Now, that will start to build the SSA fund, and that SSA fund is there and was always put there for the purpose of what you just said. Where is this money all coming from? What's That's the mechanism that helps support that. Now, we also believe that once we get the 2-year restoration done and we continue with stewardship, that after several years, that SSA fund will probably have some surplus funds. What do I mean by that? What I mean is, we don't think it's going to cost $20,000 every year, correct, Georgianne? I'm going to Georgianne because she's our chair of the Wetlands and Open Spaces, and this is a project very near and dear to her. And so we could say at the time of the tax levy several years out, well, gee, we still have money left. We know we're not going to spend more than $12,000 this year, so maybe the levy that year is only $20 or $10. We wouldn't expect it ever to be any higher than the ordinance requires for the SSA, which would be about $40 per household per year.
That changed, it used to be 75.
I think the 75 was when we first closed, we gave the $75
Well,
to start the reserve.
or something dollars when they gave it back to us, because they couldn't take it.
It was, the $75 was.
Is that what you mentioned, Kelly?
No, that's another.
Oh, that's another issue, okay.
The
There's been a
75
lot of issues with this
The
one.
$75 was to start the reserve fund.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, that,
This conservancy in this,
oh, Vic, you have to come up to the mic again. I know, but it's, you guys don't know.
based on only a couple of families that moved in over here and started this thing about conservancy, and now it's becoming an expense to keep this place, you know, the way they want it. Army Corps of Engineers, until the building of the houses here, has never touched any buckthorn or anything like that. What is it now?
It's not the Army Corps' job to touch it.
Well, right, and it's grew forever, so why are we spending money now to make somebody's, other people's properties, you know, buckthorn free? Or spending this money about.
Well, we've been spending money, Vic, we've been
for the
spending,
companies that, you know, to revitalize something that has been the way it was for years and years.
well, actually, for years and years, it didn't always have buckthorn. And Dave, do you want to explain that? How invasive?
Buckthorn is where over here, where the side of this, the height of this building, until they can cut them out.
Buckthorn is an invasive plant that came from Europe unintentionally, probably about 75 years ago. The native plants that evolved in this area started after this is a big picture thing, it goes way back to the last ice age. And up until about 75 years ago, there were no invasive plants, around maybe 100. And then gradually a few came in. Buckthorn came in about 75 years ago, and very gradually. And it was planted as a hedgerow. If you go out into Barrington, you'll see it between the horse farms, still to this day. Well, buckthorn didn't behave very well, and it jumped where it was supposed to be planted, and it was gone everywhere. Now, the reason that it's so important to get rid of these invasive plants, or to control them, is that they're not from around here. They're from different parts of the world where things were in balance in those parts of the world for those plants. Once they get over here, there's no diseases that keep them under control. There's no insects that keep them under control. They run rampant. And when they do that, they will take a woodland. Now, let me give you an example. As you look at the northwest corner of Cranberry Lake, that little 3.5-acre plot up there that doesn't belong to the village. It's that beautiful oak woodland up there, kind of in back of the Avon Township town you know what I'm talking about. That is probably 40 or 50 big, beautiful oaks and hickories that are maybe between 50 and 80 feet tall. Underneath those are called canopy trees. Everything underneath those trees, everything, are primarily two invasive plants, buckthorn and honeysuckle. Those are the only things down there. Now, and when I say the only things, you'll notice I'm saying there's no oaks, there's no hickories, other than the big ones. So those trees have a life expectancy just like people. An oak tree has a life expectancy of, let's say, 300 years. So at the end of 300 years, that tree falls down. There's no oak tree to replace it. So gradually over the years, that 3.5 acres is going to go away as a woodland. It's going to become a buckthorn thicket. And that is literally what it will become. So what we're trying to do here around Cranberry Lake is to prevent that from happening. So we took out all the buckthorn, and we took every one of them, we ran them through a chipper, and we used it for the wood chip path, which is all around the lake.
Is Round Lake Park or Round Lake, Great Lake participate in expense?
No, not in
There's part of it is Round Lake Park, there is a spot, isn't it?
Well, I deal-
Adjacent to the lake.
I deal with customers all the time, and I explain to them that their property is like an island. And if you get the buckthorn off your island, if you get the buckthorn off your island, you've done that, and that's all you can do. You can't take care of the next island. So Grays Lake isn't responsible for Hainesville. Hainesville's not responsible for Round Lake Beach or Round Lake Park. Everybody's got to take care of themselves. And Hainesville's chosen to take care of itself. Part of it was caused by the developer who, working with the village, enlarged the property, enlarged the buildable lots by putting in the conservation easement. So it's all part and parcel of a plan to keep this property in good shape and to not let it get out of control. And that's really what we're hired to do.
There was very recently a berm just done off of Washington by Lake Street. So Grays Lake and the surrounding communities, because we do have wetlands, do have a lot of their own berms and measures done like this. But we don't want to, that's their business, so to speak. But it is done. The Army Corps is everywhere.
Think of the IRS.
Yeah,
Right,
well,
IRS.
and also, Lake County Forest Preserves is one of the highest rated in the country because their standards are so high. So Round, Savannah, and those areas, I mean, all those areas have had burns and restorations and ongoing. So, if you will, this is Hainesville's little own, forest preserve, for lack of a better term.
That's what it is.
What I ran out of the room to get, for those people that are here tonight but weren't at the coffee, I have copies of the Army Corps permit and also copies of the deed covenant restriction. So just for anybody that would like a copy, I have them.
I think you.
I would also like to.
JD, please come up.
Again, JD, 66 West Tall Oak.
Thank you.
I'll slide the microphone back.
That's fine. You're good.
I just want to state, just from some of the things I've heard from the meeting today, it's been probably 13, 14 years when the Army Corps of Engineers, and God bless them, when they passed the permit over to Hainesville, I would think that they would have went over and surveyed the property and made sure that the developer followed everything to the T, because that's what the developer is there for. He has his own group of engineers to take care of everything as well. So I guess I just want to follow the facts. I guess I just want to follow the facts from there, since everything's been a gray area to this point. I think, 13, 14 years ago when this took place, the Army Corps of Engineers should have made sure that everything was followed to a T. And then from there, Hainesville should have double checked. Accepting the permit, we should have double checked that everything was followed then. But since it's not, it's led all this controversy, confusion, left this big gray area for the last 13, 14 years. For me, seeing is believing, and action. I think at this point, out of the 300 houses that I've looked at online, out of the, I don't even know how many I went to go see with my wife, I don't think I would have ended up in Hainesville if this was taken care of 14, 15 years ago. The community seems great. From what I've seen, I love my neighbors, they seem great. I haven't had a chance to spend too much time with them. But I think if I've seen this already on my property, I wouldn't have came to Hainesville. And I have to stress that again. I think from there, I think in a way this should either be grandfathered in. I think the residents that are most impacted by this should all submit letters to three parties, stating a letter to you guys, to the Army Corps of Engineers, and also stating one to the developer. Because of that, there should be a big lawsuit that takes place in between. Okay, there should be, and I'll be more than happy to give you the microphone, Mr. Rock, when I'm finished, because it does seem like you have something important that you'd like to share with us. I think at that time, I kind of lost my thought here. I do apologize, but then I think there should be a lawsuit that should take place with that developer between the Army Corps, because that was never followed to the T. A guy that goes to work, that tries, if I was there 14 years ago, and if I give myself 14 years, working hard, waiting to raise a family, doing my due diligence as an American citizen, paying my taxes, cutting my grass, all of the above, and etc. I wouldn't have time to sit here and read documents. So that's why, there are permits, there's a board, that's why there's, and not to point any fingers, none of you have a chance to know me yet. But I'm not trying to point a finger at anybody. I just think this is causing a huge inconvenience to all of the residents that are impacted along that path. I don't mind people running by, that's what the path's for. But now to go ahead and change my property from a vision that was already laid there for me by a developer 14 years ago, and the way it's been, I'd like it if it stayed that way. If it can't stay that way, I don't know if I'm going to stick around.
JD, I appreciate your points, and I also feel, I have to say, out of all the homeowners, number one, we don't have all of them here tonight, and I want you to know that there are some that are embracing this idea, and of course there's some, and I feel for you and your wife, because you're the newest resident, I believe, on that street right now, right?
That should be correct.
Yeah.
March.
Yeah, so I feel for you. You move there and you have a little one, and I feel badly. As far as you pursuing the Army Corps, as Jim Rock said earlier, you certainly have that right. You would probably get an answer quicker, and you might get some discussion with the Army Corps, quite frankly, if you contact them rather than us. Because I'll tell you what they're going to tell me, or our attorney, or the village attorney. They're going to say, you knew what the conditions were when you asked us to let building occur. You know what your job is. Do it. Now, you as a resident have every right to approach the Army Corps. They'll treat you differently as a resident. I don't know that they're going to grant you permission for anything, but it never hurts to ask. I encourage you, if you're confused or want other questions, to also talk to your attorney. You have every right to. As far as pursuing the developer is gone. And I believe they're not even in business anymore. There's no Deer Point Homes anymore.
I'm sure this is one of the reasons why.
Right.
You got that number right. You learn quick.
So, and you certainly can submit any letters or anything else you want to say us in writing. Unfortunately, it's not going to change what I am obligated to tell you here. I do think that what Dave said, I believe, is true. I know for some people this is really a bummer, it's not good news, and I do feel for you. And because of that, we have tried, and I'm asking the board to put together and approve at the December board meeting a plan that I think is fair and in the best. We're trying to offer you, as Dave said, be sensitive, talk about, do you want a tree? Some people don't like trees, fine. You don't want a tree, do you want shrubs? We're going to try to work with you. I think there's some villages that would just slam this down your throat. I mean, it is what it is, but we are making an effort really to try to meet with you individually and try to work with you as best you can. I am appalled and horrified that this wasn't addressed properly all along. But here we are today, and we're going to clean up this mess. And what I can tell you, the one thing I can guarantee you tonight, is that you're not going to be misled, you're not going to be lied to, and If I don't know the answer, I'm going to tell you I don't know the answer, but I'll do my best to find the answer or find out at least who the agency or the person is who has the answer.
JD, I know that you are probably imagining a nightmare of a backyard. But if you can picture, if you don't mow your lawn for a couple of weeks, how tall it gets. I mean, I'm sure that you might have gone on vacation or something, or seen somebody else's land that didn't mow their lawn for a while and it gets tall about like this. That's what Dave was talking about. If that's the kind of backyard you want and have this sedge that's only this tall, I'm sure that we could arrange to have that kind of seat put in your backyard. So it's not going to be an overgrowth of things that are this tall that evil animals can hide in. I mean, we're going to do our best to make it look the way you want it to look.
And I do appreciate that, and I don't want to, my goal here is not to make any enemies with anybody. I just wanted to state, kind of like I've already stated, how I saw the property, that's what I fell in love with. I prefer to see just grass back there. I understand, there's probably about 6 feet. If you guys want, if there could be, Gary had touched upon asking a great question on, is there any leniency, is there any of this? That's more what I'm geared towards, us being as residents, possibly writing the Army Corps of Engineers to see if something could be worked out, because it wasn't worked out, it was overlooked, the developer didn't follow his end. I'm sure there was somebody assigned in the Army Corps of Engineers before he passed over the permit, I'm sure there's some type of bylaw or something written in there maybe not a bylaw, but I'm sure they had something stated in there that, one of their guys needs to look over the property, make sure that everything was followed to T before they handed the permit over. That's in a way of me buying a car without looking it over and just signing for it. I guess maybe lack of a better analogy, that's what I'm going to use right now. But I guess maybe if there's a common ground that we could come up with, I wouldn't like to see half my property covered with anything, to be honest. This is a joke, but I'd like to play bocce ball in the summertime after I grill, to be honest. But maybe there could be some kind of common ground reached other than this is the conservancy. Yes, it hasn't been followed in the last 14 years, but we're going to follow it now. But I understand what Hainesville has to do, but I guess there could be a better outcome, to keep people happy, because really that's what we're going for. We'd like to raise families here. We'd like to have a happy community. That's why one of the reasons why we moved to a smaller community. But if some common ground could be, if we could come to some common ground, I think that would be great. Because how we have it right now, the 25 feet, that's pretty extreme. And I want to thank you guys for all the information you guys put forth to us today as well. I see that you, Mayor, that you are staying to the T on everything you state, just like everyone else as well. So I'd like to thank you guys once again. But I do have to state that this kind of leaves me uneasy and still unhappy. Thank you.
Understand. Further questions? Anybody else that'd like to address the board? Please step up. Dave?
Dave Kriz, 567 North Shrine Court, Hainesville. I'm stepping out from behind the camera for a couple of minutes here. This has come as a little bit of a surprise to me, having served on the Wetland Committee, having been aware of these projects going on, having worked with Dave and Georgianne for the last several years. Some of the things tonight have raised questions in my mind. And of course, we've discussed what is the responsibility of the SSA and what's the responsibility of the homeowners and where that line is and what that easement is and what you can do on it. I've read the original document from the Corps of Engineers. I have a copy somewhere at home. I haven't read it in a while.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping, I think we should have gotten a more basic definition of We use the term conservancy easement, we use the term SSA, and then there's a property easement. Are they the same thing? Is it two separate things?
Wait, what is the property easement?
Well, in any property, and I was in real estate, so in any property, an easement is owned by you, it's a portion of your property.
Yeah, but
that you can't really build on. But typically, in the city lot, let's say we're Commonwealth Edison, or the city had an easement for utilities, you would be able to cut
Yeah,
grass,
now I
you'd be
know what
able
you
to do
mean.
other
Okay,
things.
yeah.
And in this case, I thought, and at one point, we all thought that the easement was something you could use to your own benefit as long as you kept within certain guidelines and kept it open so that people had access to it.
If that's what they're.
So there's a question of where the line is
Now, when
drawn.
you say you have the original document, you have the permit from the
Permit,
Army Corps,
yeah,
but you
copy.
don't have a copy of their deed restriction
No,
or
not their deed
covenant.
restriction. Not their deed
Okay,
restriction. I
okay.
don't think so. I might have read it at some point.
Okay, because you wouldn't have it being in the townhouse.
Well, my
unless somebody gave-
question is, this conservancy easement that you're talking about.
Right, yeah.
Is that portion of their property that they own, that we are taking responsibility for the planting of as a village?
Yes, because it is part of the Current Conservancy SSA project. The restoration.
I thought the original SSA stopped at the property line.
No.
Okay,
No,
that was my understanding. Okay.
no, and you're right, there's been a lot of confusion about
Oh,
that.
sure.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, until recently, I never saw
Okay.
this deed covenant.
Because our property line stops at the SSA on our townhouses.
Yes, it does. You don't have a conservancy easement on your
Right,
property.
right.
I know that. Otherwise, you would be in
Yeah.
this meeting.
Okay, and my second point, the only
Yeah.
second point, is this new fee that you're talking about.
The SSA. It's not a new fee, it's just we're gonna levy this year.
Well, my understanding a couple of years back was when the village took over the SSA and took some funds out of their reserve fund or whatever was going on at the time, that whatever monies was left in the SSA, and the village decided to go through with the 5-year plan, that the village was gonna treat all their wetlands alike and be responsible for them as a unit, village-wide.
Yeah.
And not, well, that was my understanding at the time. I can go back to my records, but.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
This is my recollection, Dave. When I became mayor, this last term, not this one I just got reelected to, a hot topic was the SSA and the 5-year restoration plan, and that the village had not obtained $50,000 from Deer Point Homes to help support that 5-year restoration plan. There was a big argument about that.
So the reserves that everybody paid was not passed along to us, is that correct?
Was not, yeah, the money was not turned over to the village at the time that the village took over the property.
So was any money turned over to the village from the SSA?
$1,400 out of.
Instead of 50,000. So,
Okay.
It was like 7,000.
yeah, 7,000, okay. Well, so, the reason
Talking
we,
about
well,
lawsuit, at that point, there should have been a lawsuit.
I wasn't in office at the time. I'm just saying that when I got into office,
Okay.
that was a hot topic. It was already done.
Okay.
The village had accepted Deer Point, Cranberry Lake. It was done.
Okay,
And there were those that said, well, the village never should have accepted it till they got the 50 grand. That was a bit, but it was done, okay? So I can't change something like that. But what we agreed as a board is that we're not gonna levy the SSA for this 5-year restoration plan. We're going to, the village bit the bullet and put that money up for the 5-year restoration plan,
right.
okay? But now, as the 5-year restoration plan has come to an end, and we know we have to go on with stewardship, there was that already on the radar. And then, much to my surprise, came this issue. And when this, now the recognition of the two, it's like, well, we're not only are we gonna have to levy the SSA this year, but we're gonna do, I'm gonna recommend that we levy $38. In fact, I do wanna poll the board because Kelly would like direction for the December board meeting agenda and packet of what to prepare. So I do want a poll or consensus from the board that the levy should be $38.
You got 37.
37, excuse me.
So,
So,
Second.
Well, is that me? I don't know if that's official.
No.
No. We won't vote till December. I'm just asking for a poll or a consensus so I can have her start preparing that. You will actually vote at the December board meeting. I also, because it's been a long discussion, a long evening for everyone, I am not going to ask this board to vote on the proposal from Dave tonight. I will ask you to please ask any questions you have. One of the reasons I'm also not going to ask for the vote is Jerry brought up a good question. I don't think we're doing anything wrong. Jim agrees we're not doing anything wrong. But as a safeguard, I think, of being challenged, on the December agenda, we're going to have that we are waiving the bid process for this particular project. And that will be one vote. And then the second vote will be this proposal, okay? And I think everybody is in agreement, but please ask any questions or any comments. The dollar amount is really borderline here of whether you have to go out to bid anyway, because this is going to be over 2 years. The other thought is, I really, for native restorations, having handled the whole 5-year restoration, this is an additional sliver in the scope of things. I think you want the same company to finish the whole project. And just for a timeline, I would like to start meeting with residents and tell them this is the plan and this is what we're doing. So those items will be on the December agenda. And then Dave, I'm going to give you a copy just so you have the deed restriction or covenant that these homeowners have, just so you can read that language.
thank you. Just one last clarification.
Yeah,
So there are two separate areas we're talking about. One is the SSA itself.
no, I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, yeah, okay.
Two separate areas that are designated by law or document. One is the SSA itself under the permit application, and the other is the conservancy easements of the private properties adjoining the south end of the lake, or the south end of the SSA. These conservancy easements are part of the SSA?
The SSA is not a land area.
Okay.
The SSA is not a land area on the lake. The SSA applies to all of the homeowners within the Cranberry Lake subdivisions. So there are over 500 homes. That's the SSA.
Okay.
The SSA is an entity that was established to fund the projects that will happen.
So it's not a land area, it's in.
But it's only to fund Cranberry Lake Conservancy.
Correct.
That's all it can be
It's-
used for.
Correct. But it is not, I think what you're suggesting is that you're thinking of it as one of the sort of areas around the lake that is, no, that's, the SSA is an entity established to fund the conservation of Cranberry Lake.
Okay.
So the areas that you're talking
So the
about.
SSA is like a TIF, let's say, tax increment finance.
Yeah, it's a funding
But it doesn't
mechanism.
apply to a specific land mass or a specific district?
That development, Cranberry
It
development.
applies to
Yeah.
the buffer, which is the 100-foot area
Okay.
around the lake,
Which
which
includes,
includes
Their
those portions of the
easement
buffer that
conserv-
go onto their property.
But, okay, so does the 100 feet include All of the easement of
Yes.
each homeowner?
Yes.
Okay,
And all of the woodland
Right.
rendering.
okay, so it's one entity then?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. That wasn't clear in the past.
All right, I'm gonna give you a copy of all of this, and this has,
I didn't mean to prolong this.
no, I'm gonna give Dave a copy of the Army Corps permit, the deed restriction and covenant. And actually, here's a sample, it's Georgianne's plat of survey, and it shows the conservancy easement.
I've seen most of those, so I mean,
Well, now you'll have everything, Dave.
I'm pretty sure that
Thank you.
in the beginning, when this whole thing started, and this conservancy thing, and the SSA was involved, the plan was never that Hainesville was gonna end up owning Cranberry Lake. There was another entity that was supposedly gonna take over when the project was finished.
Land Conservancy Group originally.
And
Yeah.
when they saw the numbers and the records, they said, you know what? We don't want anything to do with this project, and Hainesville ended up with it. And I'm not saying that we got stuck with it, you know. but-
Well, no,
not-
because Gary, the SSA would have still existed.
I understand.
Yeah, it's just that the Land Conservancy Group was, don't worry, we know how to do this stuff. You have the funding mechanism, we'll do the work.
But when they saw the scope of the project,
I remember reading that in the documents. They were like
Yeah.
the management company.
Yeah, yeah.
For the conservancy.
Right. Okay, are there any further questions, comments? Going, oh, JD, you have another comment, question?
Okay, last one here. I only want to state the facts, and this just has to go with what I had mentioned earlier. Just looking over the copy here of the Department of the Army Chicago District Engineers permit here. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Chicago District has completed its review of the wetland mitigation project required by the Department of the Army DA Permit 199700576 issued to Deer Point Homes Development Corp. on May 20th, 1998. So if their review was complete, we wouldn't have this issue today. And, nothing against it.
No.
Homes then.
You're reading from the permit in 98 where they're gonna allow them to start building, and they lay out the conditions. That's not their final sign-off.
Okay, I'll review the proper documentation.
Well, there's a
I
letter
apologize
that
for,
was sent to us.
But they never did do
for
it.
getting a little excited here. Thank you.
Okay, that's okay. I know it's been a long night and probably everybody's getting tired, and some of these documents you've just been handed and maybe haven't read before. Read them. Other questions are going to come up. My cards, I think I passed out. I got one. Oh, I'm getting low. I'll get more. Please contact me. If it's a legal question that I can't answer, we'll certainly go to Jim Rock, our attorney, and get you the answer. If it's Dave Coulter you need to talk to, we'll do that. And then at the December board meeting, the plan is we will be discussing and voting on a restoration plan and moving forward with that. So, but please, in the meantime, please call us with any questions. Okay, can I have a motion for?
Wait,
Oh,
you wanted a consensus.
I got it.
Oh, you.
Right? Can I get everybody polled? It was a poll, a formal poll for the $37. It's not a formal vote, Georgina, we're not voting, but I got all the nods, correct?
I just have one thing. I'm not going to be at next month's meeting, and obviously this is a issue that's near and dear to my heart, so I really would like to know if there are any comments or concerns about that proposal that Dave Coulter made, so that I could hear it while I'm here.
Okay.
So I'm asking if anybody has anything to ask.
No, it's pretty detailed and well laid out for a proposal.
I think the only concern was, should we have had that way of the bid process on the agenda, okay? So That's why I said, you know what, it won't hurt to wait till December.
No, that's fine, I just,
Okay, yeah,
just wanted to know what's happening.
okay. All right, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Yes.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned 9:29.